They called her the Songbird of Cedar County. It was a simple title, but Abby Mackenzie's voice was anything but simple. It was the kind of voice that made the lamplight seem brighter and the cold winter nights feel a little warmer. On Sundays, it filled the little wooden church, and on weeknights, it drifted from her family's parlor, carried on the breeze across the Iowa fields. And everyone knew it was meant for more than just that. But two men knew it best. There was Ed Matthews, who showed up in a pressed suit, carrying promises in his hand and the glint of New York in his eyes. He said she belonged on a stage, not in a sod house. Then there was Will Deal, a man of quiet strength, his hands rough from the plow, and his gaze as steady as the soil he turned. He never spoke of grandeur, only of a life built together, brick by painstaking brick. So when both men stood in her parlor one evening, the air thickened with a choice, a life-altering decision. Ed pulled out a map of New York, tracing a finger across it. The world is waiting, Abby, a world of music, of silk, of light. Will stood silently, his hat clutched in his hands, his gaze fixed on her. I can only offer you the land, he said, his voice as plain and true as the soil he worked. But it will be ours, and I'll stand by you until the end. Ed scoffed. And what of her gift? Will you bury her music beneath the dust and the crops? Will didn't flinch. I will not bury it. I will honor it, he said, his voice resonating with an undeniable certainty. Even if it must live on through our children. The room fell silent. Abby looked from the glittering promise of Ed to the quiet devotion of Will. Her hand went to the pearls at her throat, a gift from her mother, a symbol of the beauty she carried within her. She let out a soft breath. She knew her choice, even if her heart ached with the finality of it. She turned to Will. Ed's face paled. He bowed his head, a flicker of pain in his eyes. He wished her a good life, and then he was gone, the sound of his carriage fading into the night. It felt final, but what happened next would prove that the story was only just beginning. Years passed. The prairie was a brutal teacher, and it showed no mercy. The sod house was a constant battle against the wind, the rain, and the wild world outside. Abby, a woman of grace, was now a woman of grit. Her hands, once soft on the piano keys, were now calloused and strong. The songbird had to learn to survive, to fight, and to endure. One summer, a sudden storm hit, and rain hammered the sod roof until water ran in rivulets down the walls. Abby shoved quilts into the cracks, her dress soaked, the children clinging to her legs, crying. Then a prairie fire swept across the fields like a monstrous, hungry thing. Will and Abby battled the flames with wet sacks, their lungs burning and their faces black with soot. They survived, but the land demanded a price for every victory. The worst, though, was still to come. The grasshoppers. They descended like a living plague, a cloud of them, so thick they blotted out the sun. By morning, every single crop was gone. The garden was a wasteland. The cottonwoods gnawed bare. Abby knelt in the field, tears streaming down her face. The land had taken everything. That night, as the children slept, Abby pulled out a small wooden box from beneath her shawls. Inside, the pearls lay cool and untouched, gleaming in the lantern light. They were the last piece of her old life, a memory of silk and song in a world of dust and dirt. She knew what she had to do. I'll take them to town, she told Will, her voice shaking. They'll bring enough to get us through the winter. The children won't starve. Will came to her, his face etched with exhaustion and worry. He took the pearls from her hand, his rough fingers holding them with a gentleness that broke her heart. Abby, he said, his voice low and firm, I can stand watching the land break me, but I will not stand by and watch you give away the last piece of yourself. He pressed the pearls back into her palm. They are a promise, he insisted, that the world won't always be this hard, that there is still beauty worth keeping, even if we can't touch it now. Abby placed the pearls back in the box, shutting the lid with a quiet click. She felt a wave of despair wash over her, but then she looked at the lantern on the table, its small flames swaying in the draft, but holding steady against the dark. The struggle was far from over, but what happened next would change everything. Will's cough started in the winter, a deep rattling sound that never went away. It stayed with him through the spring and into the brutal summer. He was worn down by the land, by the endless work, by the fight to survive. One night he sat on the porch staring out at the fields, and Abby knew. She sat beside him, their hands linked, the silence between them filled with 60 years of shared struggle and quiet love. "The land takes its due," he whispered, his voice faint, "but you'll carry it farther than I ever could." A few weeks later, he was gone. The house felt vast and silent. Abby sat at the window, the pearls in her lap, turning them over and over in her trembling hands. The light of the porch lantern swayed outside, a solitary beacon in the endless dark. It was a small comfort, a fragile flicker against the overwhelming grief. But she knew that she could not break. Not yet. She had to keep going for the children. And as the years passed, she watched as they grew, as the seeds of her own lost dreams blossomed in them, in ways she never could have imagined. Her children were her legacy, but one of them had a secret that would unravel a betrayal decades in the making. Isabel, her eldest daughter, had inherited her mother's voice. She sang in the church, her hymns rising clear and true. One Sunday, she sang before a hall full of people, and when she finished, the whole town stood and applauded. Isabel ran to her mother, flushed with excitement. "Mama, I sang louder than the storm this time," she whispered, a secret only they understood. Abby smiled, her eyes filled with tears. "And now the whole world will hear you." Margaret, the artist, painted the prairie she had grown up on. Her canvases captured the wild beauty and the brutal truth of the land. At the county fair, her painting of a storm was a sensation. "You told me even emptiness can be beautiful," she said to her mother, her eyes shining. Mac, the ambitious one, left the farm and found success at the bank. He was sharp-eyed and sure-footed. "The prairie didn't eat my boots this time, Mama," he said, coming home one night with a proud grin. "It paid me in silver instead." He didn't know it yet, but that money would be the key to a buried secret. John, the quiet reader, became a lawyer, his voice measured and steady in the courtroom. Abby sat in the back, listening to him argue his first case, her heart full. He had gone farther than anyone thought possible, but she never doubted him. And Grace, the frailest, devoured books and stories, her imagination building worlds far beyond the endless horizon. She carried a flame, a stubborn light that refused to be extinguished. But one night, as Abby read to Grace, a strange detail in an old newspaper article caught her eye. It was about a man named Ed Matthews. He had become a renowned music producer in New York, a kingmaker of the concert halls. A small note mentioned he had retired after a scandal involving stolen sheet music. Abby's breath hitched in her throat. Stolen? But that couldn't be right. He had brought her sheet music. He had loved music. Something in her gut twisted. She had to know more. She tucked the newspaper away and started asking questions. Quietly, carefully, a plan forming in her mind. The more she dug, the more the pieces of a terrifying puzzle began to fall into place. It turned out Ed Matthews wasn't a talent scout. He was a con man. He had a history of luring away talented young women with promises of fame and fortune, only to steal their music and their ideas. He would disappear, leaving them with nothing. The envelope he had carried that night in her parlor wasn't a promise of a future. It was a blank piece of paper. The very idea of New York, of a glittering life of music and silk, had been a lie. A calculated, cruel lie. But then she found something else. The sheet music. It hadn't been his at all. It was the work of a brilliant, aspiring composer, a woman from a neighboring town who had disappeared a year before Ed showed up in Cedar County. Her name was Elizabeth. Ed had stolen her compositions, claiming them as his own. Abby's heart hammered in her chest. Everything had been a lie. She felt a wave of nausea, followed by a searing, white-hot rage. She had chosen Will, not because Ed's offer was a lie, but because she loved him. But what if she hadn't? What if she had been another one of his victims? The rage turned to a cold, hard resolve. Abby was no longer the soft-hearted girl who dreamed of singing in concert halls. She was a mother, a survivor, a widow forged in the unforgiving fire of the prairie. Ed Matthews was a ghost from a past that she had buried decades ago, but she couldn't let his deceit stand. The theft wasn't just of music. It was of a life he had snuffed out. She had to find Elizabeth, but Elizabeth's trail went cold. Abby was at a dead end. But then she remembered the pearls. The pearls were the one thing that had survived. They were a link to her past, a tangible piece of the life she had once dreamed of. She had saved them. Will had insisted on it, and now she knew why. They were a symbol of what was lost, of what she had chosen, and of the truth she now held in her hands. The pearls were the key. She gave the pearls to Catherine, her granddaughter, a symbol of the future, a trust passed down through generations. But when Catherine returned with a box, a small, worn piece of parchment was tucked inside. It was a note, and it was from Will. Abby, it read, I knew you would one day find this. The music Ed brought you wasn't his. I bought it for $1 from a farmer who said a woman named Elizabeth gave it to him before she left town. Ed was a thief. I didn't want to tell you, because I didn't want his deceit to taint your memory of a world you deserved. I did it to protect you, not from him, but from the bitterness of his lies. Let the music live, but never forget the price of its song. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Will had known the truth all along. He had sacrificed his own desire to protect her, to allow her to make her choice with an open heart. He had chosen love over truth, knowing that the truth would have hurt her more than his silence ever could. Abby's hands trembled as she clutched the note. He had been a guardian of her spirit, of her innocence, of the very thing Ed had tried to corrupt. Abby had lived with a lie, a beautiful, perfect lie that her husband had crafted to protect her. But now, it wasn't a lie anymore. It was a testament to his love, a final act of devotion. She had mourned him, grieved for the man she had lost, but now she felt him close to her again, closer than ever. He had honored her gift, just as he had promised, even if it meant hiding a painful truth. He hadn't buried her music. He had buried the betrayal, allowing her to live a life free from bitterness and regret. The story of her life wasn't just about her choice between two men, but about a love so deep it was willing to keep a secret, to endure hardship, and to trust that hope would be enough. The lantern that swayed outside her home was no longer just a symbol of her struggle, but a testament to the love that had kept its flame burning, a quiet, unwavering light that had guided her through a life of hardship and sacrifice. The light endured. It was the legacy she had passed down, a legacy of love, honesty, and hope. A love story, a story of perseverance, and a story of a lie that was, in its own way, the greatest truth of all. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe.